The dust storm howled across the mining world, turning the sky into a thick red haze. Daniel pulled his scarf tighter around his face as he guided his squad through the broken rocks and scattered metal of the old station. The air smelled of burnt fuel and rust. Raiders had attacked again, and command wanted them cleared out before they moved deeper into human territory. Daniel moved carefully, his rifle ready. His squad followed close behind. They had been on missions like this many times, and most of them expected only another skirmish, another report, and another march back to the ship. But Daniel always kept his eyes sharp because raids rarely meant just stolen supplies. Raiders often took people. As they crossed the wrecked courtyard, Daniel froze. A sound reached his ears. Not the roar of engines or the crack of weapons, but a softer sound. It was the faint rattle of chains. He motioned for the squad to hold, then stepped toward the sound. Behind a pile of collapsed metal, he found her. An alien woman sat on the ground, her hands bound by iron cuffs that connected to a stake driven into the earth. Her skin was pale with faint patterns like silver veins across her arms. Her long hair clung to her face, tangled and dusty, but her eyes, bright silver, sharp even through exhaustion, lifted and met his. For a moment, Daniel forgot the noise of the storm and the weight of his rifle. He saw strength in those eyes, but also years of pain. She did not beg. She did not cry. She simply stared, as if daring him to walk away. One of his squad members came up behind him. "Leave her, Daniel." Command said to clear the area, not gather strays. Daniel clenched his jaw. She is not a stray. She is a prisoner. We don't have orders to take her. We need to move. The woman did not speak. Her lips pressed tight and her body remained still. But her eyes stayed fixed on Daniel. He felt something heavy in his chest. He had seen raiders take slaves before. Most of the time, soldiers looked away, telling themselves it was not their duty. But Daniel could not look away this time. He slung his rifle and knelt by the chain. The soldier behind him cursed. "You'll get us in trouble." "Then let me take the blame," Daniel said firmly. He pulled a small tool from his belt and worked at the lock. The iron was old, and it gave way with a sharp snap. The alien woman drew in a quiet breath. Her arms trembled as she pulled the broken chain free. Daniel stood and held out his hand to her. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Her skin was cold, but the grip was steady. She rose to her feet, taller than he expected, her posture straight even though she had been bound for who knew how long. "My name is Daniel," he said softly. "You're safe now." She looked at him, her voice low and rough as if unused for years. "Alira." "Alira," he repeated, the name unfamiliar yet strong. He guided her back toward the squad. They looked uneasy, but none dared argue again. Daniel's voice carried a tone that left no space for debate. They moved quickly to the transport ship hidden in the valley. The storm grew worse, stinging their faces with sharp grains of sand. Inside the ship, Alira sat in silence while Daniel gave her water and a blanket. She drank slowly, her silver eyes never leaving his face. It was not suspicion he saw there, but a quiet study, as though she was trying to understand him. "Where are you from?" Daniel asked gently. She shook her head. "Not here. Not free." Her words were few, but heavy with meaning. Daniel wanted to ask more, but before he could, the ship lifted off. Command would not like this. He would likely face questions, maybe punishment. But as he looked at Alira sitting quietly with the blanket around her shoulders, he knew he could not regret it. The days that followed passed quickly. She stayed close to him during the journey back to base, saying little but always watching. He gave her food, found clothes that fit, and tried to make her feel safe. His squad avoided her, whispering among themselves. To them she was trouble. To Daniel, she was someone who deserved a chance. One night, as the ship neared human territory, Daniel woke to find her gone from her small bunk. He searched the corridors and finally found a note written in simple words on a piece of cloth. "Thank you. I will not forget." He ran to the docking bay, but she was already gone. The hatch stood open to the night sky of a border world where they had stopped for supplies. She had vanished into the dark. Daniel stood there holding the cloth in his hands, the storm winds blowing against him. He did not know where she had gone or if he would ever see her again. But he knew one thing with certainty. He had made the only choice he could live with. He had freed her, and somewhere beyond the stars she carried his act of mercy with her. Years passed, and Daniel's life grew quiet. After leaving military service, he settled on a small farming town at the edge of human space. The world was calm, far from the noise of war and the politics of the great fleets. His days became filled with soil, crops, and the rhythm of the seasons. He built a home with his own hands, strong and plain, surrounded by wide fields that stretched toward the horizon. At dawn he rose to the sound of birds and worked until the evening when the sky turned gold. It was a simple life, but for Daniel it was enough. Or at least he tried to make it enough. Every now and then, memories of the war returned. He remembered the roar of engines, the shouts of comrades, and the burning wrecks of stations. But most of all, he remembered her, Alira, the silver-eyed woman he had freed so many years ago. He often thought of that night when she disappeared, leaving only a message scratched onto cloth. "Thank you. I will not forget." Sometimes, as he walked among the fields, Daniel wondered where she had gone. Did she return to her people? Did she find safety? Or had the raiders caught her again? He had no answers, only hope. Hope that she lived free. In the town, people knew Daniel as a quiet farmer who kept to himself. He helped neighbors when machines broke, shared tools, and joined in the harvest festivals. They respected him, though few truly knew him. He did not speak much of his past, and no one asked. At night, when the stars filled the sky, Daniel often sat on his porch and looked upward. The stars were countless, shining like distant fires. Somewhere out there, he thought, Alira might be looking at the same sky. That thought gave him peace, but also a strange longing he could not name. The galaxy beyond Earth was not at peace. Traders passing through town brought news from the wider stars. They spoke of rebellions rising against slavers, of alien worlds breaking chains, and of fleets uniting under new banners. Stories told of a mysterious leader who had gathered scattered tribes and given them hope. Daniel listened but said nothing. Such things felt far away from his quiet life. Still, the stories stirred something in him. The way the trader spoke of that leader reminded him of Alira. Strong, proud, unwilling to bow. Could it be her? He shook his head at the thought. How could one woman rise so high in such a short time? He told himself it was only coincidence. Yet the thought lingered. Seasons passed. The farm grew with his care. He repaired fences, taught himself new methods of planting, and filled his storehouse with grain. Life was steady, yet Daniel felt the quiet weight of loneliness. There were families in the town, couples who shared laughter in the market, children who played by the river. Daniel had friends, but no one who truly stayed at his side. Sometimes, when the nights were long, he dreamed. In those dreams, he saw Alira standing among stars, her silver eyes watching him. He always woke with a start, the image sharp in his mind. One evening, during a gathering at the town hall, traders once again brought news. This time, their voices carried awe. "They say the slavers are falling one by one," a trader told the crowd. "A new queen leads her people with iron strength. She gives freedom to the enslaved and strikes fear into her enemies." "Which world is she from?" someone asked. "No one knows for sure, but they call her the Silver Queen because her eyes shine like metal." Daniel froze where he stood. The words hit him like a hammer.
Silver eyes.
His chest tightened. Could it truly be her? He left the gathering early, walking back to his farm under the starlight. His thoughts were a storm. If the queen was Alira, then she had kept her promise. She had not forgotten. She had risen beyond anything he could have imagined, yet he told himself not to hope too much. The galaxy was wide. Silver eyes were rare but not impossible. Still, he could not shake the feeling that fate was moving, slowly drawing a path back toward him. That night, Daniel sat on his porch long after the lamps had gone dark. The stars shimmered above, silent and endless. He thought of Alira's last words to him, the promise written in rough strokes. "I will not forget." A part of him wanted to believe she still carried that memory. A part of him wondered if she would ever return. For now, his life remained quiet. He worked the fields, tended the soil, and waited. He did not know that beyond the edges of human space, great fleets moved. He did not know that his small act of kindness had already helped shape the course of history. But he would know soon. Very soon. The morning began like any other. Daniel woke at dawn, stepped outside his farmhouse, and breathed in the cool air of his fields. The soil was dark and rich, and the crops swayed lightly in the breeze. He picked up his tools and prepared for another long day of work. The routine gave him comfort. The farm was quiet, steady, and simple, but the sky was not quiet that morning. As Daniel pushed his cart toward the fields, A shadow passed across the ground. He looked up. The clouds shifted, and in their place came shapes unlike anything he had seen in years. Sleek silver ships, their hulls glowing faintly, descended slowly through the atmosphere. They were not human vessels. Their design was too smooth, too graceful, as if carved by art as much as by engineering. The town stirred in alarm. Farmers dropped tools. Children ran to call their parents. Shopkeepers shut their doors. People gathered in the square, pointing upward as the fleet settled above the town like giants watching from the heavens. Daniel stood still, the cart forgotten behind him. His chest grew tight. Something deep inside him already knew. From the largest ship, beams of light opened into the town square. Figures stepped out, tall and armored, in shining plates that caught the sunlight. They were alien guards, each carrying long spears of energy. The crowd murmured in fear and awe. And then she appeared. At the center of the guards walked a woman taller than most humans, her presence commanding. She wore a flowing cloak of white and silver, with a crown-like crest upon her brow. Her hair, once tangled and dusty, now shone like dark silk. Her silver eyes glowed like twin stars. It was Alira. The townspeople gasped and whispered to each other. Some stepped back, frightened by her alien presence, while others bowed slightly out of instinct. But Alira ignored them all. Her eyes searched only for one face. She walked through the crowd without hesitation, each step measured and graceful. The guards kept their distance, their weapons ready, but it was clear she did not come as an enemy. She came with purpose. Daniel's hands shook as he gripped the edge of his cart. For years he had wondered, dreamed, and doubted. Now she was here, no longer a captive woman bound by chains, but a queen, standing proud before the world. She stopped at the edge of his farm, her gaze locking with his. "Daniel," she said, her voice strong, carrying across the silence of the crowd. He swallowed hard. "Alira." The people stared in shock. They could not understand how their quiet farmer knew this alien queen, but Daniel did not hear them. His world had shrunk to the space between him and her. She stepped closer, her cloak brushing against the soil of his land. "Years ago you freed me when I had nothing. I swore I would not forget, and I have not. I have come back." Daniel searched her face, half expecting it to be a dream, but the warmth in her eyes was real. The strength in her voice was real. He nodded slowly. "You became a queen." Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "Because of you, your mercy gave me the chance to rise, and now I have returned not as the one you saved, but as the one who chooses to stand before you." The crowd whispered louder, voices rising like waves. Questions filled the air. Who was she? What did she want? Why had she come here? But Alira did not look at them. She looked only at Daniel. "I owe you a debt that cannot be measured," she said, "and I will not leave without honoring it." Daniel felt a storm inside his chest. For years he had lived quietly, telling himself the memory of her was only a moment in the past. But now the past stood on his land, reshaped into something greater than he ever imagined. He took a step toward her. "You do not owe me anything. I did what was right. That is all." Her silver eyes softened. "And that is why I trust you above all others." The guards shifted uneasily, as though they did not approve of their queen speaking so openly to a human farmer. But Alira raised her hand, silencing them without a word. "I will ask you once, Daniel," she said. "Will you come with me? Will you see the world your kindness helped create?" The crowd went silent. Every ear strained to hear his answer. Daniel's heart pounded. His farm, his life, his quiet days. All of it now felt small compared to the weight of her words. He looked at the fields he had worked so long, then back at Alira, who stood tall and unshaken, waiting for him. At last, he spoke. "Yes, I will go with you." The queen of a new world bowed her head once in respect, then turned to her guards. "Prepare for his coming. He travels with us." The people of the town watched in stunned silence as Daniel walked toward the ship beside the alien queen. Their quiet farmer, the man they thought they knew, was leaving with someone who carried the weight of stars in her eyes. For Daniel, it felt as though the years of waiting had ended. The moment he never thought would come had arrived. Alira had returned not as a prisoner needing rescue, but as a queen offering him a place at her side. And together, they stepped into a future that none of the watching townspeople could imagine. The ship rose above the farmlands, leaving the quiet town behind. Daniel stood at the wide window of the vessel, watching the earth grow small beneath him. His hands pressed lightly against the glass as the stars opened ahead. For years he had dreamed of peace among his fields, yet now he found himself stepping into a new life he could never have imagined. Alira stood near him, her cloak flowing gently as the air systems hummed. She seemed calm, though Daniel noticed her eyes never rested. She scanned everything, her posture always upright, the weight of her crown resting on her like a duty that never left. "You built a home," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. Daniel nodded. "A small one, a farm." It was quiet. She turned her silver gaze toward him. "Did you find peace?" He thought about it for a moment before answering. "Some peace, but not answers." Her eyes lingered on him as though she understood more than he said. Then she walked toward the command chamber, and Daniel followed. Inside, the ship's crew bowed their heads as she entered. They were of her people, tall, strong, with markings across their skin that glimmered faintly in the light. Each movement carried discipline, each voice carried respect. Daniel could feel their suspicion when their eyes slid toward him, but no one spoke against their queen's choice. Alira gestured to a seat beside her. "Come, there are things you should see." The wide screen before them shifted, showing stars and worlds scattered across the map. Red markers burned across several systems. "The galaxy is not free yet," she explained. "The slavers are broken but not destroyed. They scatter, gather strength, and strike again. My people rose because of your choice, but we are not finished." Daniel studied the map. "You built this? All of it?" She nodded. "I led the broken tribes, the scattered survivors. I gave them one banner, one cause. Together we became strong enough to stand. But it began with the moment you broke my chain. Without that, I might have never found the strength to lead." Daniel shifted uneasily. "I only did what was right. And that," she said firmly, "is what made all the difference." Silence fell for a moment as he absorbed her words. He looked at her, no longer the captive woman he once freed, but a queen who carried the weight of thousands. He felt both pride and doubt. "Why bring me here, Alira? I am only a farmer now." She studied him, her silver eyes steady. "Because you are the only one I can trust without question. My advisors are skilled, but many have their own desires. They see power, land, or pride. You see only what is right. I need that voice near me." Daniel did not answer at once. He had lived years without war, years without command or battle. To return to conflict even at her side would mean leaving behind the quiet life he had built. Yet as he looked at her, he knew the truth. His choice years ago had tied his fate to hers, whether he had wished it or not. The ship soon reached her world. Daniel stood at the deck as they descended. The planet glowed blue and green, its seas wide and its forests endless. Towers of shining crystal and metal rose from the surface, their design unlike anything human hands had built. It was a kingdom alive with both nature and craft. When they landed, a crowd gathered at the base of the platform. Thousands of her people stood waiting, their cheers rising as Alira stepped down. Daniel followed a step behind, feeling the weight of countless eyes. Some faces showed joy, others curiosity, and some doubt. Advisors in long robes approached, bowing deeply. One spoke quickly in their language, his tone sharp, his eyes flicking toward Daniel. Alira raised her hand, silencing him. "He is my guest," she declared in a voice that carried across the platform. "He walks beside me with my trust." The advisors bowed again, though Daniel could see the tension in their movements. He understood then, though Alira ruled, not everyone approved of her bringing a human into their halls. Inside her palace, Daniel was shown a chamber of stone and glass, simple, yet filled with quiet beauty. Light filtered down through clear panels, casting soft patterns across the floor. He set down his pack, though it felt strange to carry so little in a place so vast. That evening, Alira invited him to a council meeting. The chamber was filled with generals and nobles, each speaking with fire in their voices. They argued about borders, raids, and battles yet to come. Daniel sat quietly, listening. When a map showed an enemy force gathering near the edge of her territory, Alira turned to him. "What would you do, Daniel? Speak your thought." The council fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned on him. He cleared his throat. "If you strike too soon, you may lose more than you gain. But if you wait too long, the enemy will grow stronger. Sometimes the best choice is not the quickest blade, but the shield that holds until the right moment comes." The generals murmured, some nodding, others frowning. Alira's eyes lit with approval. "Wise words," she said, spoken without pride but with care. Later, when the meeting ended, Daniel walked with her through the palace halls. She stopped at a balcony, the city spread below, the stars bright above. "You see why I brought you here," she said quietly. "You speak not for gain but for truth. That is what I need most." Daniel looked out at the shining towers, the endless sky. He felt the weight of what lay ahead. He was no longer only a farmer. He was part of something larger, something dangerous, but also something filled with hope. And as he stood beside Alira, he knew his choice on that broken mining world had led him to this moment. The days that followed on Alira's world were filled with movement and tension. Daniel soon learned that peace was fragile here. Her people had won their freedom, but enemies still lurked in the shadows. The slavers who once ruled the outer systems were not gone. They had retreated, regrouped, and waited for their chance to strike again. Daniel spent his mornings walking through the city. Towers of shining stone and glass stretched toward the sky, while markets filled the air with voices and colors he had never seen before. The people lived with energy and pride, yet always with watchful eyes. Freedom was new to them, and fear of losing it lay close beneath the surface. One afternoon, as Daniel crossed a high balcony, he noticed smoke rising in the distance. Bells rang across the city, deep and urgent. Guards rushed through the streets, their armor shining under the sun. Daniel hurried to the palace where Alira stood in the council chamber, her cloak thrown back as generals crowded around her. "The slavers have struck," one general reported. "A fleet of raiders has attacked the northern border. Villages burn. They mean to test our strength." Murmurs of anger filled the chamber. Alira raised her hand and silence fell. Her silver eyes burned with resolve. "We will not bow. Not again. Send word to the legions. We march to defend our people." The generals bowed, but some glanced uneasily toward Daniel. He stood near the edge of the chamber, listening. When the meeting ended, Alira called him aside. "You know war," she said. "Will you stand with us?" Daniel looked into her eyes. "If you need me, I will stand." That evening, the army gathered at the city gates. Thousands of soldiers stood in ranks, their banners whipping in the wind. Alira rode at the front on a tall beast with armor of silver and blue. Daniel walked beside her, a borrowed rifle slung across his back. Though the soldiers looked at him with doubt, he felt their respect slowly growing. The march was long. Villagers lined the roads, raising their voices in cheers as the army passed. Daniel saw fear in their faces, but also hope when they looked upon their queen. It struck him then how much Alira had become to her people. She was more than a ruler. She was a symbol of freedom. By the second night, they reached the borderlands. Fires burned in the distance where raiders had struck. The army set up camp and scouts brought grim news. The enemy was close, with ships ready to raid again. Alira gathered her generals around a map. Arguments broke out. Some demanded immediate attack, others warned of ambush. Daniel listened, then finally spoke. "If you rush, you play into their hands," he said. "They expect fury. But if you use patience, you force them to show their weakness. Make them think you hesitate. They will grow bold and reveal their position. Then you strike where they least expect." The room grew quiet. Some frowned, but Alira studied him closely. At last she nodded. "We will follow this plan." The next day the army waited. Scouts reported enemy movement, but Alira held her forces still. The raiders grew impatient. They struck small villages, believing the queen was afraid to move. But this revealed their camps and their numbers. When the time came, Alira gave the order. Her army swept around the raiders in a wide arc, striking from both flanks at once. The enemy was caught unprepared, their ships pinned between cliffs and rivers. Daniel fought alongside her guards. His rifle cracked through the smoke, his voice carrying clear orders to the soldiers near him. Though many had doubted him, his calm under fire and sharp judgment turned their trust. The battle raged until night. When the smoke cleared, the raiders fled in broken pieces, their camps burning behind them. Cheers rose from the army as Alira stood tall before them, her silver eyes shining in the firelight. Daniel stood beside her, his breath heavy, his clothes dark with dust. Soldiers who once looked at him with doubt now bowed their heads in respect. Some clasped his shoulder, calling him brother. That night, Alira entered his tent. She removed her crown and set it aside, her face weary but proud. "Your words saved lives," she told him. "Your courage gave strength. I owe you more than thanks." Daniel shook his head. "You owe me nothing. I only did what was right." Her gaze softened, and for a moment the weight of her crown seemed lighter. "You are unlike anyone in this world," she said quietly. That is why I trust you." Outside, the soldiers sang songs of victory. The campfires lit the night like stars fallen to the earth. Daniel looked at Alira and felt the truth settle deep inside him. He was no longer just a farmer pulled into her world. He was part of her cause now, and though danger still loomed beyond the horizon, he knew one thing: he would not turn away. The morning after the battle was quiet. Smoke still rose from the broken raider camps, and the air smelled of ash and scorched earth. Daniel walked through the camp, checking on soldiers and helping where he could. Though the fighting had ended, the toll on the people was clear. Some soldiers nursed bruises and burns, while others sat silently, staring at the fires. Alira moved among them with calm authority, her silver eyes gentle yet commanding. She offered words of encouragement, touched shoulders, and listened to concerns. Her presence alone lifted spirits. Daniel watched her and thought of the small, bound woman he had once freed. She had grown into a leader whose courage could inspire thousands, yet the same kindness remained in her heart. Later, she found Daniel near the edge of the camp, where the grass met the forest. He was cleaning his rifle, the motion steady and automatic, his mind only half on the task. "You are quiet this morning," Alira said, her voice soft against the rustle of leaves. Daniel looked up. "I was thinking about all that happened, about the lives we saved and those we could not." Her silver eyes grew distant for a moment. "I carry that weight every day," she said. "Leadership is not simple. Victory is never without cost. I feel the loss of each person even when the battle is won." Daniel nodded. "I understand that. I have seen loss too. But you gave them hope. That matters more than any loss." Alira studied him, a rare vulnerability in her expression. "When I was bound, when I had nothing, I never imagined I could lead. Your act of mercy changed everything. It gave me the strength to rise, to fight for freedom, to make a life for my people. And now, Daniel, I want to ask something of you." He frowned slightly. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who will speak truth even when it is hard to hear. I ask you to stay, not as a visitor, not as a guest, but as a voice I can rely on. I need your counsel, your courage, and your honesty. Will you stay with me?" Daniel felt a weight settle over his chest. He had lived years of quiet simplicity on Earth, tending crops and watching the stars. To stay here meant leaving all of that behind. It meant stepping fully into a world of battles, decisions, and responsibility he had never asked for. "I don't know if I am worthy of such a place," he admitted. "You are," she said firmly. "You have always been. You saved me when no one else would. That choice shaped more than one life. It shaped the lives of thousands. That is worth more than any title or crown." He studied her, seeing her not as a queen or a leader, but as the woman who had once trusted him completely. Her eyes held no judgment, only expectation and hope. For the first time, he understood that his actions had consequences far beyond his understanding. I will stay," he said finally. "Not because I owe you anything, but because I want to. I want to help, and I want to see this through with you." Alira smiled, the faintest curve of her lips that held both relief and pride. She reached out and placed her hand over his, her touch firm but gentle. "Then we will face the future together." They stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet of the forest and the distant sounds of the camp. Around them, soldiers moved, tending to their duties. Daniel realized that he had become part of something larger than himself, a life full of purpose he had never expected. That evening, a council meeting convened in the palace. Daniel sat beside Alira as generals and advisors discussed the next steps. Some voices were harsh, questioning his presence. Others murmured doubt about human involvement in their plans. Alira silenced each objection with a word or a glance. "This is my decision," she said. "He stays because he is trusted. His judgment is sound. We move forward with both human and alien wisdom guiding us." Daniel felt the weight of their scrutiny, yet he also felt acceptance. He had never sought power or recognition, but here, in the company of leaders and soldiers, he found a sense of belonging he had never known. As the meeting ended, Alira walked with him through the palace halls. They paused at a balcony overlooking the city, lights shining like stars across the land. "This world, my people, the victories and the losses, none of it would exist without that one moment," she said softly, her silver eyes glinting. "Do you realize that?" Daniel nodded. "I only did what was right." She turned her face toward the horizon. "And because of that, I have chosen you. Not because of duty, but because you have the courage to stand when it matters most. That is rare even among my people." The wind stirred, lifting her cloak and his hair. Daniel looked out across the city, the towers gleaming in the light of the setting sun. He thought of the journey that had brought him here, from the red dust of a mining world to the palace of a queen who trusted him completely. "I will stay," he said again, quietly. "I am ready for what comes next." Alira's hand squeezed his briefly before she released it. "Then we face it together. Every choice, every battle, every victory, and every loss. We face it side by side." For the first time in years, Daniel felt truly at peace, not in the quiet of a farm or the simplicity of a life alone, but in the certainty that he had a purpose, a path, and someone to share it with. The city below seemed to glow brighter that night, as if the stars themselves had recognized a new bond forming between human and queen. Daniel knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he no longer feared it. With Alira at his side, he was ready to meet whatever challenges awaited. And in that moment, as night fell over the palace, they stood together, two figures bound by trust, courage, and choice, ready to shape the future of a world beyond imagination. The night was still, yet the tension in the palace was electric. Daniel stood at the balcony overlooking the city, watching the distant glow of the fires from the last skirmishes. Though Alira's army had defeated the raiders, danger still lingered. Not all enemies had been revealed, and whispers of betrayal moved quietly through the palace halls. Alira approached him, her silver eyes thoughtful. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she gazed at the city below, at the lights that sparkled like scattered stars. Finally, she turned to him. "Not all trust is earned by rank or title," she said. "Some is earned by courage and loyalty. That is why you are here." Daniel looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He had faced soldiers and enemies, but her trust was unlike anything he had known. It was not given lightly, and it was not easy to earn. Yet he felt it fully, a quiet bond between them that needed no words to explain. Suddenly, alarms echoed through the palace. Guards ran past them, shouting warnings. Daniel instinctively moved beside Alira. The advisors who had once doubted him were now rushing to defend their queen. A group of conspirators had opened the northern gates, allowing a band of enemy raiders to enter the city. The palace shook with the sound of battle. Daniel drew his rifle and followed Alira as she moved toward the main hall, commanding her guards and soldiers with precision. The halls were chaotic. Soldiers clashed with intruders and shouts filled the air. Daniel's heart pounded as he ran beside Alira, shielding her when a raider lunged from the shadows. She moved with elegance and precision, her blade flashing in silver arcs that cut through the enemy ranks. Together, they fought, moving as a single unit. Soldiers nearby watched in awe as their queen and her human companion took the lead. Where Alira struck with authority, Daniel covered with strategy and skill, guiding soldiers, covering blind spots, and protecting civilians. The palace, usually a place of diplomacy and counsel, had become a battlefield, yet their coordination inspired courage in everyone. Hours passed. The raiders were driven back, their forces shattered by the unity and determination of Alira's people. The northern gates were secured and the conspirators captured. The palace was safe again, though the signs of conflict remained: burned doors, broken furniture, and the echoes of fear that lingered in empty halls. In the quiet aftermath, Daniel and Alira stood together in the main hall, surveying the damage. Her silver eyes softened as she looked at him. "You have done more than I ever expected," she said quietly. "You saved this place, and more importantly, you helped save my people." Daniel shook his head. "I only did what I could. You led them. You gave them hope. I just helped hold the line." Alira's hand touched his arm gently, a gesture both intimate and respectful. "No, you were more than help. You were courage. You were trust made real, and that is something I will never forget." For the first time since he had returned to her world, Daniel felt a sense of completeness. He had left his quiet life on Earth, leaving behind a farm and solitude, and stepped into a world of battles, leadership, and responsibility. He had feared he might lose himself, yet standing beside Alira, he found his place. That evening, the palace gathered for a celebration. Soldiers, advisors, and citizens alike came to honor their queen and the victories they had won. Daniel stood quietly beside Alira as she addressed the crowd. Her voice carried across the hall and out into the city. No chain can bind the soul that chooses freedom, she said. No enemy can break the spirit of those who stand together. Today we honor not only our victory, but the courage that brought it. And among those who fought, we honor one human who chose to act when it mattered most. The crowd erupted in applause. But Daniel only looked at Alira. She smiled at him and he saw pride, gratitude, and something deeper, a connection that went beyond words, beyond rank, beyond time. Later, in the quiet of her chambers, Alira turned to him. "You could leave now," she said softly. "You could return to your life on Earth, to your quiet farm. You are not required to stay." Daniel shook his head. "I could not leave. I have seen your people, I have seen what your courage can do. And I have seen you. I want to stay. Not because of duty, but because I choose to be here with you." Her silver eyes glimmered with emotion. She reached out and for a long moment their hands met. "Then we are partners," she said. "Not ruler and guest, not queen and soldier, but partners in what comes next." Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep within him. He had once freed a woman from chains, never imagining that years later she would return to him as a queen, not as a captive but as someone who trusted him above all others. Together, they walked to the balcony, looking out over the city they had saved. The lights shimmered like stars and the night air was cool and filled with possibility. Daniel realized that life had given him more than he had hoped. The bond he had formed with Alira was stronger than any battlefield, more enduring than any victory. And as they stood side by side, human and queen, they understood that the future belonged not to the timid or the fearful, but to those who chose courage, loyalty, and trust. The stars above glimmered, reflecting in her silver eyes. Daniel felt a quiet certainty that, no matter what challenges awaited, they would face them together. The queen who had returned to his life would not only change the course of a world, but also the course of his heart. At last, Daniel smiled. For the first time in years, he felt fully at home, and together, they watched the dawn of a new day, the bond between human and queen eternal.